Okay, everybody, welcome to the Enabling Remote Work under Exceptional Circumstances webinar. My name is Juho Peltomaa. I'm the CTO of Innofactor. I have extensive experience in management and marketing and crisis communications, mainly from startups and from ICT industry. Matti Paukkonen will be presenting. He's a modern workplace architect, a guru guy, one of our best. Knows everything about Microsoft 365 and Teams. He's the go-to guy when you really want to know something. Jyrki Vepsäläinen has many roles in the company, Vice President Sales and Growth, of course, but also acting ICT Director. Jyrki will tell lots of things about ICT later on. Okay, let's start. Background, why did we want to do this webinar? Actually, it was so that we ourselves went through the process and noticed that we learned a lot, and we didn't want to keep it to ourselves, but share it and maybe help some other companies to cope. And of course, in the bigger picture, we want societies to cope as well. So we are trying to help here. And what's unique about this situation, lots of people have prepared for lots of remote work, and that's of course a usual thing. But now, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we actually have no control of the schedule. The virus tells us the schedule, and we more or less have to take a running start and just like go with it. So we have no time to prepare. We have no option to move the deadline or anything like that. Uncertainty, of course, we don't know how like bad the situation is really, so that might demotivate some people or something like that. That's one bad thing. Of course, this concerns almost practically every part of the organization, and we might have to bring people together that do not usually work together. So that's one thing to consider here. We don't know the duration. It might be a few weeks, it might be a few months, so hard to plan everything. Then again, good side is that even if the coronavirus turns out to be a lot more friendly than we thought it to be, this whole preparation doesn't go to waste. We of course still will have this kind of situations in the world, so it makes sense to do this right and do this well right now. And Innofactor as a company does know what it's talking about. Remote work is already our day-to-day mode of operation for many people. We happen to be also experts in the remote working tools and other Microsoft tools, so that's really a good thing when you are making a webinar like this. Of course, now even for us, it was the first time that we decided that I was in the meeting where we decided that let's make the whole 550 plus organization work remotely. And also it's a long, probably very long lasting period, so not just 1 week or anything like that. So we noticed that, hey, there are some themes and some things that we should take care of. And that was kind of where we started to think, now that we have this checklist, why wouldn't we share it? Like from a company to company, we are hoping that everyone will succeed, including our beloved competitors. So we want to share this information and help other people to be prepared as well. At some point in this webinar, we will also tell about Microsoft's free tools for remote work. Many other big companies have remote tools as well now for free. So I bet Google has really cool stuff and so on, but we are mainly focusing on Microsoft because we are a Microsoft company, so to speak. Okay, one side of things that's often forgotten when you talk about tech things is the humane or human aspect of the situation. So we must remember now when we use the remote tools, even if they were perfectly tech-wise, the usual methods and dynamics will be disrupted very badly. This means that in practice, when you are at the office, you smile to people, maybe tap on the back and do some practical jokes or whatnot. So all of those things are suddenly gone. So you would have to somehow replace them digitally, like the good feeling that people tend to spread at the office should be now somehow relayed. Of course, when there's a pandemic, people tend to be uncertain, and that means that they will probably think of the negative sides more. So that's something to take into account. Misunderstandings, as we all know from social media, are just horrifying sometimes when you just use text-based communication. So let's be really accurate, like what we say, and let's try really hard to also emphasize the like empathy and all those things that are not necessarily relayed by emails and chats and such. Also consider setting up a virtual coffee room just to replace some of the things that's missing currently, somewhere that people can tell their feelings and good things about their remote days and so on. So we highly recommend that. So how to evaluate the organization's readiness for remote work, especially when it's this kind of exceptional situation. Of course, you need to make a contingency plan and somehow manage the situation. This is not an exhaustive list of what should be done. This is just some of the things that we did in our company. Of course, we cannot even tell everything because we have some secrecy concerning certain customers and so on, but we will tell you the main things that we did. Of course, first we like gathered a team from different sides of company and made really clear responsibilities for the team and also a decision-making structure. This means that the team, of course, cannot decide about everything. It sometimes has to go to the executive board or CEO or even board of directors, but it still kind of has a clear decision-making model and knows when to call someone and when it's not needed. Then, of course, we arranged lots of meetings. Part of them, like for example, once a week, and part of them just one-offs. Also, the model of decision-making in these meetings should be clear. And then the situational picture is often in these cases, it might be from day to day, even like day one, everything looks pretty good. Day two, we get bad news and so on. So risk assessment is really hard in these cases. Like, of course, you should assess your own organization's operational capability, like who can work in what conditions and what kind of work can be done and so on. Remote work is, of course, a big thing here. Some tasks might not simply be possible without being physically present and so on. Commitments to customers are really important. We actually did so that business unit leaders like gathered the customers that needed like special care, and then we made decisions based on those let's say red flags and kind of took care of the situations. Also, how to protect staff is important, and when you have all these different scenarios, and it's of course sometimes hard to know what to do, but you just simply have to make decisions, and of course this includes the remote work as well. Then all about kind of communications is, of course, it needs to be frequent and it needs to be consistent. And you don't have to lie about things that you don't know. It's way better to say in day one that I don't know the situation and I'll tell you more about it tomorrow than to pretend that it's something and then you have to correct that thing or like to whole other direction next day. So that makes no sense. Audiences are, of course, your own employees are the most important target group because without them you cannot take care of customers. Customers, of course, bring you all the money, so you have to take care of good relations with them and also make your own status known. There should be no big surprises even in this surprising situation. Other stakeholders, including we are a public company, so investors and so on, you should think about how to communicate with them. Innofactor, for example, has offices in 4 countries and different places in those countries. So it's not necessarily enough to communicate just on one front or just to have one situational picture. Instead, you might have one country that's in way worse condition, another country that's doing pretty well, and so on. So it's not necessarily enough to have one communication line. Maintaining clear distinction between what the actual authorities are saying and what's your take on it is really important because you shouldn't the employee or customer shouldn't be in the situation where they cannot tell the difference between what's being said by authorities and what's your opinion. So that was my first part of the webinar, and next we have Matti Paukkonen, who's going to tell you things about Teams and other tools as well. So Matti, take it away.
Okay. Next, I'm going to give you some examples and ideas about how you can utilize Microsoft 365 services to support your remote working situation. First thing are the actual face-to-face meetings, which needs to be transformed to actual Teams meetings, and that is easy to do. You just add those Teams meeting links to your existing meetings. With Outlook, you just click Teams meeting button on your ribbon, or if you are using Outlook on the web, you just enable the Teams meeting to your meetings. When joining the meeting, it's good to check your sound settings, your video settings, and if you have a background like I do, which is kind of messy, you can enable the background blur already to hide your messy background from the other participants. It's also good to have an agenda, like always in the meeting. And when you're hosting large meetings, it's also good to have a moderator on the meeting chat who is following the possible questions, discussions there, and brings them to the actual meeting discussion. And presenter can then focus on presenting the content. Meeting settings. If the users are not familiar with Teams, you should go through the meeting settings, how you are enabling the camera, how you are toggling the mute, how you are sharing content, and also meeting settings, which can be found underneath the 3 dots. And there you can find the device settings, also enabling the background blur, and start the recording. Use the camera. It makes the meetings more personal. When you are hosting, for example, a team meeting, use the camera at least for having a short conversation before the actual agenda about all the, for example, weather, politics, whatever is the daily hot topic, to actually get the feeling of the meeting, and also sharing some just feelings and ideas from your team. Or if your participants are not familiar with each other, you can use camera to actually introduce yourself shortly before the actual meeting agenda. And take advantage of the recording options on Teams. So you can record your meetings, and those participants who will be missing the meetings are actually able to see the content and see the meeting afterwards. Use ad hoc meetings and use them on channels. It's easy way to do when you just go to your channel, start a new discussion, and actually click Meet Now button, and you have a meeting right there. It's way better because actually people who are following the channel can join in the meeting if the meeting agenda or subject is interesting for them. So keep the meetings, ad hoc meetings on channels. Create a virtual coffee room because you cannot have those face-to-face conversation around the coffee table on this exceptional situation. So create a virtual coffee room to host those conversation discussions about weather, hot topics, politics, also a little bit about work. But what is a traditional discussion around the coffee table? You can create for example, a channel in your organization team and host the virtual coffee meeting there. And when you need to do the online one-to-one calls, use chats for starting the calls, and if you need to do the video, you can access it also there. Then the conversations. Use channels for conversations. The conversation is then openly available for all the team members. There are no such thing as silent information, and all the work-related conversations, for example, about projects or your team, something, for example, product development, should be handled on the channel. So it's easily available for everyone. Use the visual options on your conversation. For example, if you need to notify the user that I'm away, use the subject on your conversation. Or if you need to notify, for example, about new remote working guidance, use the announcement type to get the more visual header on your conversation. Chat groups are also important. For example, all kinds of unofficial or free conversations like sharing photos or discussing about topics outside of work. But you can also utilize those chat groups for urgent messaging because Teams has the urgent messaging feature, which notifies the user 10 times about the new conversation. So you can, for example, build an office chat group to notify some things regarding to your office, or even bigger, larger groups. And instruct your users to make those important channels visible by pinning them on top of their Teams and channels list, because it's more easier to follow up the content of the channel when it's on top of the list, and you can see the notifications and everything way better. Then the collaboration around documents. Put all of your work-related documents on Teams, find a team for those documents and share them with other team members. You can use channels, for example, bringing some kind of a context, for example, if you have different type of documents you're handling with your team. If you are saving the documents on your OneDrive, they are not accessible by your team, so it's way better to use Teams and channels to store the documentation. Use linking styles, for example. You can link important documents or documents you are working on with your team as a tab to team, or use team linking the documents on your conversations, because you can actually see more information about the document. For example, where it's located, what is the team, what is the channel, and also better kind of visualization what type of the document it is. It's way better than using just an URL. And please, when you're doing memos, do not use Wiki, use OneNote, because it's way better. You can use it also on Teams tab through your browser or using a desktop app, so it's available on multiple channels. Training materials are important in the exceptional situation. You can share them via Teams tabs or use your intranet to share your guidelines, but I suggest recording Teams videos, so do a meeting, do the actual guidance there, and record it, and you have it on your stream, and you can share it via stream to, for example, on Teams tabs or to your intranet or whatever you like to do. So you have those short guidance videos available to your end users. And also share all the Microsoft materials to your end users, for example, on your intranet or your Teams via email, of course, because there's a lot of good ready-made guidance available on Microsoft materials. Place your content on SharePoint when you are informing about the exceptional situation like coronavirus. Create a necessary pages or create even a site for informing your users about ongoing situation. Also use several channels to inform and link your SharePoint content, for example, to Teams. If you have Yammer in use, link them to Yammer. And of course, email is also a viable solution for sharing information. Just to make sure that your users are not missing the important updates and for example, what is your guidance during the exceptional situation. Also use rollups to bring up new updated information ready, easily available to your users. And it's good practice also to add all the external sources about the situation who are informing, for example, governance, local authorities, whatever is needed, make them available also to your as a part of your content. And you can use, for example, crisis management site template, which is now available on SharePoint Online, if you like to do kind of a larger content on SharePoint. Take advantage of your analytics. For example, you can see that how many users are actually viewing, for example, your information about coronavirus, or how many users are actually looking your crisis management site. And also you can see what happens to the Teams usage. Is it growing? Is there more channel messages than chat messages, or how are the calls improving? And you can actually do more kind of a guidance to the end users and trainings to make those tools in use. Then the crucial part is don't forget the end user support, because end users will be confused about the changing situation. If you are going quickly to a situation that you are remotely working from home, the users will be very confused. First, take care of the tools. You need to take care of that users get access to those tools. They know when to use those, and also that you have enough licenses and your remote working connections work. Start gathering and actually sharing your best practices. You might not have any best practices when you are moving remotely working from home, but start gathering those and sharing them right away to your users. Also, you need some kind of a common practices, for example, when you are creating a new team, when your new channel is created, when you are creating a folder, what is the purpose of this team, what is the purpose of your organization team, where you actually are informing end users about the situation, where you can find the HR to answer your questions, where you are hosting those Q&A sessions. And communication and bringing those guidelines is so important in for example, in this exceptional situation. So you need to communicate about the changes, bring some guidelines for working with customers, for example, and stuff like that needs to be taken care of. And start organizing trainings right away. So recording and sharing those short videos is a good idea. Also having some online trainings, like for example, half an hour, how you are hosting a Teams meeting, or how you are actually sharing the documents in Teams. That kind of stuff is good practice to start trainings right away. and bring support to your end users. When they have questions, tools might not work, they don't find the guidance, you need to take care of the support for the end users, that they really can actually know where to ask for help. Then on this exceptional situation, also Microsoft is committed to help customers to actually enable remote working at home, and there is several things you can do. So first thing, if you need just, for example, chats and audio and video calls, you can enable Teams free for your organization. You don't actually need to, you just need email addresses and you can join there quite easily, and it's free for you to use. But if you're a larger organization, you, for example, want to enable Teams, enable maybe SharePoint for crisis management and informing end users, one option is to enable 6 months free trial for Office 365 E1 when you have actually all the online Office 365 tools available to your users. So they can use Teams, they can use SharePoint, they can also use Office Online tools for editing and co-authoring documents and stuff like that. And Microsoft has also provided a SharePoint site template for crisis management for communication on an exceptional situation. So that is also available, and you can enable that to your SharePoint site in just a few clicks from the Microsoft provisioning service. So that is available there. Okay.
All right, everyone. Next, we're going to talk about ensuring ICT continuity. We have been preparing for working remotely, also from ICT continuity point of view at Innofactor, together with our ICT team led by Jyrki Vepsäläinen. So let's look at our experience and see where perhaps there could be things that you could use in your organization as well. Obviously, first and foremost comes IT security, regardless of whether we work remotely or at the office. And it's especially important to pay attention and communicate about the need to maintain the same level of security that you would normally when working remotely to all your employees. It's possible that people during stress time would resort a bit easier to fast fixes and buy software off the internet, use WhatsApp for messaging, and this is something that we need to make very clear, that we have to continue using all of those secure company approved methods of handling customer data and talking about customer projects. However, of course, there can be room for third-party solutions like WhatsApp when teams want to just hang out and talk about trivial things with each other. It's not about that. There's a place for those kind of tools and third-party apps. However, it's important to maintain and communicate to the team that they will need to resort to all of the normal tools approved by the company for doing their daily business. And of course, this is something that we are required to do as part of our agreement with our customers, and I'm sure everyone else around the country has the same needs. The other area I'm going to talk about is arranging ICT support. This is again something where we need to be sure that all of the employees who are working remotely or employees who maybe start a new job during this remote work period, that they will get the support they need. This means having access to hardware, especially for new employees. We need to make sure that we are prepared to deliver them the PCs and the phones and the kind of equipment they need, the credentials for systems training, as well as then for existing employees. We need to be prepared to hand out, for instance, additional hardware to replace broken PCs and these kind of things. This is something you typically want to have prepared for already in advance. And of course, we know that there are cases where you might not have the kind of time or chance to do this. So then if you haven't, it's time to start preparing that for that scenario right now. And the kind of typical things we would do is make sure that we have a quantity of hardware available, and very importantly, that the hardware is also set up correctly, or that it can be provisioned over the air, so that the employee can just basically take the PC, log in, and start working. This is something which at Innofactor during this coronavirus crisis we have been doing for several weeks, and that means then we have the sufficient hardware availability, either in our own premises or then dedicated quantity of stock of hardware at our supplier. It's of course something where we need to also take into account that there will need to be people who handle these logistics, who hand out PCs and are available to, for instance, answer to and take care of ICT tickets. We are at the moment proceeding according to the government recommendations and have a person available on site. However, of course, taking into consideration the needs for hygiene and security of the employees. And should the situation change, we would of course then need to reconsider that. One of the things that's important as well is to be aware of what is your software license situation, so that you're able to ramp up potentially new people to use applications remotely that might not normally need to do so. I take as an example VPN clients. Nowadays in the cloud solution era, a lot of the authentication and identity management is already managed in the Microsoft Cloud without the need for VPN. However, there are certain scenarios and certain applications where VPN is required. And as an example, you would want to make sure that you have adequate amount of VPN licenses available. If typically you only need 10 a day, under remote work circumstances, you might need sufficient or significantly higher amount on a day. And to prepare for that by acquiring additional licenses for these kind of applications is very important during these kind of times that we're having. The availability of hardware, as said, is something, if you haven't prepared for, you definitely want to start doing that now, while there is disruptions in the supply chain from China-based factories. There is still availability in several places, and you want to start mapping those out if you would not have done that already. Then, of course, depending a bit on the type of equipment people need at home, it's good to keep an inventory of those to be aware of, what is your quantity of possibly typical peripherals, as well as then if you do have some special, let's say, camera technology or hardware adapters that people would need, you want to know that you have those and you have enough of them when you start then providing those to people who work remotely. It's not about sort of stalking people that they're not misusing those. It's simply to be sure that you have the right quantities and you're aware of gaps, and then you can manage those gaps in quantities before you get more. One of these things that has come like a very tangible issue is getting remote workers the availability of monitors, availability of keyboards and potentially docking stations. This is something where you have to use common sense. How we did it is we had teams basically carpool monitors out to the different team member locations. That worked out fine. In our case, people were typically working in the same area, and there were enough people with personal cars. But you also want to make sure that people with, for instance, limitations in how much they can carry, especially in public transportations, that they do get those additional equipment home in a safe and convenient way. And of course, kind of the last thing about preparatory measures pre-crisis. This is something, again, that is wise to have covered up front. We know that not all have been able to do so, but latest at the time that you start moving more and more into remote work, it's important that those bottlenecks and sort of issues and gaps come out quickly. One of the most primary resources that we need when working remotely is, of course, bandwidth for data connections and data connectivity. If you have the chance, do have your people test out and highlight as soon as possible what kind of connectivity issues they have. You may have provided company-specific data connections at home. In our case, for instance, we have provided people with data connectivity in their mobile phone subscriptions. And one easy means to improve this situation is, for instance, to go for a chat with your network operator and increase the speed, downlink and uplink speed of your data subscriptions for the whole mass of employees who are working remotely. This is something we did, and it's a great backup for those cases when we know that some person might not have in their own home, for instance, a room with good connectivity, and they would need to work in that room. And something which is kind of a precautionary measure that you can start taking in these uncertain times, if you haven't done already, is to make sure that for those people who do work at the office, that they will always take their PCs, chargers, phone chargers with them every day, even if they intend to go back to work, because it could be they are diagnosed with something they need to be quarantined for, and then it's important that they have their hardware with them. So kind of to help this out, we made a small checklist for kind of moving to remote work. This checklist obviously is something which you can use and sort of refine to your own needs. The availability of licenses, something we discussed with regard to, for instance, VPN licenses, could be things like CRM licenses, where you might not have that many people who usually need to use them, but now due to remote work or due to people maybe with licenses being out sick, you would want to make sure that you can add that number adequately. Then the essential tools, taking those with you, PCs, phones, chargers, and if you have other peripherals, hardware that people would need for their work, making sure that people have them when they leave for remote work or when they leave home, even if they intend to come back currently, that they have those with them. The data connectivity is something where it's quite easy to go on a team level and just, in the daily team meeting you might have in these times, check with people. Anyone had problems with bandwidth? If there are problems, then as said, the company can help by enhancing the connectivity speed in the employees' work connections over the mobile. And in some cases, what we have done is we have prepared a quantity of 4G modems, things that you basically plug in the wall and have a SIM card in them that we can then in emergency situations hand out to people or provide to people by courier so that they can set up connectivity at their house. Typically, a lot of us working on a lot of content or a lot of visual stuff, slides, apps. We do need more than a monitor in the laptop in order to be effective. It pays off to allow people to take their monitors with them. We basically had a fairly kind of open policy there. We encourage people to take their monitors. We made sure for people that they're not afraid to take those for liability reasons, and encourage really that people rather work effectively than have just a very small keyboard and laptop at their home, and then lose many tens of % of their work efficiency. When people are out and about working remotely, it's important, of course, also that you have the key communication channels for the organization. What we're currently doing is we have created a Crisis modern SharePoint site in our intra, and we're also using Teams effectively and incorporating that site also in our Teams, so that people can from any terminal quickly kind of go and check up what's the latest updates, and of course if there are daily or weekly updates, that they know where to go for those. In cases where, again, data connectivity might be an issue, it's important to think of what could be backup channels. Some teleoperators are arranging some ability to, for instance, do mass SMS sending. But right now, at this stage of the situation, we have seen that the basic infrastructure in society works fairly well. So typically, the kind of basic internet connectivity related or requiring communications channels have worked fairly well, but you might want to look at least for some key people. Would there be also other routes like SMS messaging or these type of things? Yeah, IT support and possibility to help in transporting backup stuff if somebody's PC is broken. That's something we have arranged currently, so that we have a person on call at the office in a safe place with enough room around, with enough hygiene around. And then if we need to transport, we are able to use courier services and other means to get the hardware to the people. Here, again, important that when the hardware arrives, that the provisioning or setup is done so that the person can start using that as soon as possible. And then maybe most importantly of all, regardless of your function or role, we need to ensure that our team members are looked after, that the people are asked on a frequent basis how they're doing. We encourage to do this on Teams, on team meetings, so that each manager or team member can kind of get a good idea that people are live and well, able to work, and that nobody is left alone. So with that, we're moving to the conclusion, and I hope this was useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really good. And I have some words to conclude this webinar. Decision on how to move to remote work is often difficult. There are certain fears. Definitely you will be maybe laughed at if you do it for nothing, but of course in this kind of situation it will be worth it in the end. So you just go with it now, and then you can always take it back later, the decision, if you want, but now it's time to make the decision. What will the customers say? Customers, when they are well informed, they are your friends, they are humans just like you, so they completely understand. We haven't had any difficulties with customers at this point. We have been able to talk with them and agree on everything. Competitors are of course always lurking behind the corner, but you can bet that they have their hands full as well right now, so they are humans, so I think we can kind of trust that no one does anything like super stupid in circumstances like this. And if you're worried about your employees being lazy, then well, you should maybe change your employees or I don't know, yourself, but now is the place where you should trust people, and that's a good thing, that's a good exercise. Decision, of course, should be really clear. You shouldn't say anything like maybe we'll do something like this. You should do like be definitive and tell how things are done from now on. Logical, it should be based on facts and so on, and of course fair. You should take into account people's lives and so on. For example, we decided to strongly encourage employees to work remotely. This means that our office is currently almost empty, just a handful of people, usually like a couple of hundreds of them or something like that. So a couple of hundred of them or something like that. So of course, everything is based on your risk assessment, and not everyone has the not everyone can work remotely, and maybe someone will have to work remotely. You should take those into account. And you probably have some customers working at customers' premises, or you have subcontractors in your own premises. So do pay attention to those as well. And common sense and flexibility are the key here. So if you have I don't know, if someone is missing an internet connection, then it makes sense to improvise it somehow just to keep things running instead of you should not use every bureaucratic tool at your disposal at this point. And some positive thoughts. This is a serious situation, a bad situation, but I thought that I would find some positive things as well. So one is definitely that you have now a possibility to improve actually your organization's working culture. It's not all bad when people are in different situations. It's a bit like at offsite, you will get different opinions and different people step up and so on. So this is a good thing. Also, this helps to promote the remote work as one of the tools that you have at your disposal. So you should definitely take advantage of that. Remote work in the longer run, of course, will help us combating the climate change. So even though it doesn't make you smile right now, maybe later on when you look at this in 10 years or so, you will understand that, hey, this was one of the things that started the real remote working in companies. And of course, one really big thing here is the trust. You have now the possibility to develop trust. You cannot track everyone all the time and so on. So you will have to learn to trust your employees, and the employees will have to learn to trust you as well. So that's about it. And please remember to take good care of yourself and each other and stay safe. Thank you very much.